I don't care, man.
Sounds epic.
I prostrate myself before the podcast world. If my embarrassment brings us views and likes, then so be it.
I also prostate myself before the podcast.
Hello, the Sonic City Council is now in session. Thank you once again for inviting us into your headphones, your car, your home, your mind. Davey Sipes, it's good to see you again as always.
Yes, Jesse, likewise. Though I'm here by court order, you've got better lawyers than me. And Meatbags, I bid you good morrow or evening or whatever it is where you are.
Yes.
It's dark where I live.
And now, the invisible gavel will come down from the heavens. Inserted by Max Taylor. Gavel. Yeah, I know how that sounded. Whatever.
Me too.
That's what she said. You know what? That's the word that goes with it. Max Taylor, our lovely engineer from Desert Sound Studios, is responsible for the virtual gavel. He is the gatekeeper. He's the gavel keeper, if you will. So he's got to get.
And isn't he lovely?
Yeah, very, very lovely.
Isn't he wonderful?
Yes. I love your shirt, sir. I love the all the people you got on there. Malcolm X. Hold on, I got to move my session on Zoom here so I could see it. Yeah, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Langston Hughes. Yeah, good shit going on. I'm
feeling it. This is just grown up. I had all of these amazing books sitting around in my house. Turns out, when I grew up, I realized I was the only person who read them. But when I was a little kid, I was like, look at all these books laying around. So every single one of these was some shit from like... It's so funny that it all ended up on a t-shirt that I found. But that's the power of the... What do you call them? What's the thing we're on right now?
That's the... Yeah, power of the interweb.
I almost said that's the power of porn. I mean, it's like an inverse. That's an algorithm. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm a sucker for those shirts when you recognize all the names on the shirt. You're like, I know those people. And
yeah, it's just like one of those Disneyland shirts, like from a year ago. Or
yeah. No, I love those shirts, and because sometimes it's like punk people, sometimes it's like rock or music people, sometimes it's authors, and then it's like I like saying, ooh, what's the configuration of people you got going on there? Yeah,
sometimes it's ordinary people.
Yes.
Sometimes it's everyday people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
Just depends.
Yes, it does.
Why have you convened us thusly? Why have you summoned the gavel of truth and brought me out of my slumber of ages?
Well, I have good reason to revive you from your slumber, good sir. We are talking to a mutual friend of ours today, a phenomenal guitar player, an author of musical books, a session musician, multiple different titles. This is Mark Burgess, and he lives in our hometown of the dusty dirt of the Antelope Valley in the high desert of Southern California. And Mark is one of those people that when you go to a show, you see a musical, you're in a club, whatever it is, you're going to see an orchestra. He could potentially be in any of those situations. He's can play in ensembles. He's toured with Guitar Shorty, legendary blues player. He's actually played with, I did some research on Mark before, which is odd because I've known him for such a long time, and sometimes it's weird to research your friends like that. But he's also played with J.J. Jackson, and he's also... one of the books that he wrote is for Alfred Music, the publishing company.
Music, yeah.
Yeah, and he wrote a book on picking for guitar players, left-handed and right-handed. So he's done a big foray into that world. And yeah, he's just been the musician for hire in a bunch of different situations. He's played for Don Rickles quite a few times. And yeah, he's just one of those working musician people that just has sort of a phenomenal insight and mind for music. From Jersey originally, and then moved to L.A. and studied at Rutgers, and just has this immense wealth of music knowledge and information. And a lot of the times when we get together and, or gig or hang out, whatever it is, or I go see him play, we end up just talking music for I don't even know how long. It just happens. And so I don't know what we're going to get into today, but it just, it could be about past gigs. It could be about talking about records and weird shit that we listen to. Like, I don't know. I just love talking to him, and he's got a brilliant insight and mind for this kind of stuff.
I'm inclined to agree.
Yes.
I like this fella. Learned a lot from Mark Burgess, and he's one of the coolest people I've ever played with. One of the funnest people. The one thing I want to say, because I think it bears things, is that I think I played with a lot of different people, and a lot of people who have his ability don't take chances when they play, when they perform. And one thing that I love about being just even hanging out with Mark is that he's one of those people who's just open and honest and takes chances with what he does. And he's good at what he does, but he's always out there pushing himself to go harder. And that inspires me. So I'm glad he came in to our secret underground laboratory territory. Yeah.
Just getting an insight into how his brain thinks is something, or how he thinks, what's ticking, what is it that allows him to take those chances? How his brain thinks. We need to put that on a T-shirt.
And I can't believe he let me remove that portion of the skull. That was really...
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to it now, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Burying the lead.
Yeah. Let's get to it.
Yeah.
Mark Burgess, thank you so much for joining us today, man. We appreciate you coming on here and talking music and spreading the good word and, the jersey and all that good stuff, man. We appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here. Glad to be anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're here and there.
Yeah. As we were just talking about in our 20-minute tangent before this, that is a sweet Frank Zappa poster, and we were talking about our love of Frank Zappa and all those things. And now that I think about that, you've turned me on to a lot of good music over the years that I'm incredibly thankful for.
Wow, that's great. I mean, you guys too. I mean, I kind of, you gotta. I am a little guilty of poo-pooing new stuff sometimes. Like, I'll hear new stuff, and I'm just like, man, there's just nothing happening there. There's nothing happening.
You poo-poo the new?
Yeah,
huh?
I do. Okay. Every once in a while, yeah. Although I did just recently get turned on to Grandson.
No,
have you heard this guy, Grandson?
I have.
No.
I have heard of this cat, but I haven't really listened yet.
Awesome, man. It's like lo-fi trap, but with guitars instead of, it's got these 808 trap beats, but then there's guitars, these lo-fi out-of-tune guitars and stuff. It's really good. And his vocals, and it's real political protest stuff.
Really?
It's just, it's really good. You guys would dig it. Yeah, you'll dig it. It's He's got a single called Dirty that's just, man, it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's awesome. I'll definitely check that out.
As always, turning us on to the next
I'm very
thing,
happy with it.
See?
Yeah, I'm actually really happy with it. And, let me think. What else have I been listening to recently? A lot of jazz, man. Lots of, Mingus, a lot of Bill Evans, a lot of, the classic stuff, Miles, and... let me think. Thelonious. So, anyway,
that's when I do a lot.
Yeah, Thelonious, man. I can't play any of that stuff, but man, where is he coming from? Where are these melodies that he writes coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah. No, same here. One of my favorite albums he ever did was Alone in San Francisco, I think it is, and he put out 2 volumes of it, and it's just him at a piano. It's not not a band or, anything really arranged. It's just him going for it, and then it's really a snapshot into how his brain works as far as arrangement and feel and phrasing and all of that kind of stuff. When he's just left to his own devices and his own timing and everything, it's just it's fascinating.
I was when Keith Jarrett died, there was some stuff There was a bunch of stuff online, and I didn't realize that was his bag. That like he like basically went on stage and played for 2 hours. Like he would go on stage and didn't really have anything planned. Like I think they were called the Norway concerts.
Oh, okay.
And he would, this is like 70s, late 70s, early 80s, I think, when he did this whole tour where he planned nothing. And he would just walk on stage and sit down at the piano and start playing, and then he would play for 2 hours.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he might go into songs, he might not. He, just whatever he did.
Yeah. No, and that kind of goes back to a Zap of Philosophy that he talked about, to where I wish more musicians would do this. And this is why I love going to watch jazz and anything more improvisational, because he was comparing, and this is back in the 80s, comparing the musician in that modern day to being the equivalent of a jukebox, where it's like people are just going up, they go to a show, they want to see the song exactly how it is, and they don't want any variation, and they have a good time. But like he looked at it as like, especially when he took solos, that I'm going to try to craft a piece in the moment, and I'm working against the clock of when I need to come back into the the main melody or verse or chorus of a song. And I don't know. It's kind of interesting because I think you kind of follow in that same vein. If anybody's heard you play, and that
I get in a lot of trouble for it too.
No, man,
I get yelled at.
No, you dive into the unknown, and that's the beautiful thing about when I started as a young lad and going to jam sessions, and you were there, I was always excited to see you with a tweed amp and a Telecaster and the cool hat, and I knew, okay, like this is going to be a adventurous evening, and it's not just going to be the same songs you hear over and over again. We're gonna adventure into the unknown tonight, and that's the best part about it.
That's always been my philosophy is, if you want to hear the record, go home and listen to the record, because it's going to be better. It's going to, if that's what you want to hear, but if you want to, like, I've always been interested in bands that were, back in the day, Joe Jackson had put out a live record. Right, so it was like a double record, so it was, 4 sides, and there were 3 dramatically different versions of "Is She Really Going Out with Him" on that record.
Okay,
right? There was like there was one that was very similar to the record, and then there was another one that was more like a bossa nova feel to it, and then there was one that was completely a cappella, right? Just the voices, and it just blew, and this was the first record that I read, the liner notes to it, and he said this. He said, the reason I put this out is because the live versions of my songs are very, very different than the recorded versions of my songs. If you want to hear the record, go home and listen to the record.
Right.
But here's what happens when we do live, and that just, Crimson was the same way too. I was I'm a big Crimson fan.
Yep.
And live is just a completely different, rearranged, different experience altogether. It's a different song.
Absolutely.
It's a different composition.
Yeah.
That's stark, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and that interests me.
Absolutely.
That's what interests me.
Yeah.
More than just recreating the song. Which I've done some of too, and that's okay, that's fine. But if I do what I want, I'm not playing.
Yeah. 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 Right.
And I've been in bands where guys were like, "Well, we kind of like to really follow the record," and I'm just like, "Yeah, I'm not your guy."
No.
I am not your guy.
No, it's like we're trying to go to.
It takes balls to say that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think but it kind of saves time. It saves time later down the road. But granted, like if we're gonna play Sultans, like I'm not gonna play anything other than Mark Knopfler's guitar solo on Sultans of Swing, because there's nothing in the world I can do that's gonna be any better than that. Or if you're playing Stairway to Heaven, like you got to play that solo, right? I mean, you got to do it. It's there's no way around it.
Yeah. No,
but
and it's
In general, I like to stretch things out. I like big, long intros where it's like, wait a minute, what are they doing? What is this? And then all of a sudden, it turns into the song.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, there it is,
Yeah.
whatever that means.
Right. And
has that sensibility always been part of your musicianship, you reckon?
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just, you don't.
Davey, I think Davey just had a come to Jesus moment about me. Dave's like, huh?
No, not necessarily.
But yeah, it's always
no. But I'm like, that's only part of it. I was like, that's the first layer of the. That's just the first layer of.
Sure, I think there's always going to be more than one layer.
That'll happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, and on the other end of that pendulum, you'll go from crazy, spaced out King Crimson, but then you're the same person that you're like, hey, one time I was doing Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix, but I did the chicken pickin' country version, and I heard you do it one time, and I was like, that's awesome. Like, it was just if you ever get your mind together, and I was like, hell yeah, dude, that is fucking rad.
You know what nobody ever picked up on was that the guitar solo was, those country sixths that you do, that.
Yes.
It was that, but it was actually Third Stone from the Sun, but like with those intervals and chicken picking and everything. So yeah, Third Stone from the Sun was in there too. Long time ago, a friend of mine said something. A friend of mine who's a really weird guy, admittedly, said something to me about, Are You Experienced is a country tune. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I realized, oh my God, he's right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And
there's a really good version online of some guy doing chicken picking version of Stairway to Heaven where he does the intro, but like real fast chicken picking.
Yeah.
And like makes it work. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and so it's not like you just specialize in one area. You can go to any of these different areas that you want to based on kind of what you're hearing. And where's the foundation of that? How does a musician build those things? Like, is it purely theory? Is it purely chops? Is it your imagination? Is it when chops meet imagination? Where do you think that comes from?
I think part of it is just your personality. Like, to me, it's all good, right? It's all good. Like I'm like, if it's musical and there's some integrity to it, I'm down for it. You know what I mean? Eminem first came out and I was like, wow, I don't know who this kid is, but what he's doing is amazing.
Yeah.
And then Frank or King Crimson or, any of the jazz cats who just have chops forever and ever,
Yeah.
Oscar Peterson. I was listening to Oscar Peterson one day, and I was just like, "Get the fuck out of here, man! That guy, like, how is that even possible to be that good on an instrument?" Like, or you watch Jeff Beck, and you're just like, "I don't understand how he can make a sound that beautiful come out of a Strat plugged straight into a Marshall. Like, how does he do that?" And nobody knows. I mean, that's why he's Jeff Beck. So
wizard.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean. So part of it is just that, your imagination. But the other thing was that I spent a lot of time working on technique. I mean, and like nobody wants to hear this. People don't want to hear this. But technique is what will make or break you later. Right? You get the technique, and then if your technique is correct, it's never going to hold you back. You're never going to come up against something that like, my hands just won't do that. Maybe your hands won't do that because of where your thumb is or because of the way you're holding the pick in your right hand or whatever. But, there is something to be said for technique.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because just the other day I was watching an interview with a guy and he talked about the idol of technique, right? The golden calf of technique, which I thought was like a really good, that's a really good term because it can definitely become that. It can definitely become about it becomes like the thing that you're doing more than the music. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a clutch issue for sure.
Yeah, and I think
you're talking about the difference between like copying shit forever and making something original.
That's
eventually.
right.
Like,
that's right.
This is where the rubber meets the road, brother, for sure.
Yeah. And I think there has to be this point where, okay, I've got this technique and it's down, and I can pretty much do anything I want now. I got to throw it out the window. You know what I mean? It's like learning your scales or whatever. You have to know them well enough that you can forget all about them and just make the music, right?
Yep.
And trust, okay, the foundation is there. It's all in there. Now I'm going to play. Now I'm just going to play.
Right.
And like what happens, right? So,
right.
And I think musicians are, there's always this like sort of back and forth in music. The punk thing was great because it sort of like lowered the bar and let everybody, okay, pick up a guitar, make a, join a band, just play, just yell and scream and play and everything like that. But then there was this whole thing that happened where like if you could really play, you were kind of looked down on. Because I was in this situation where I was in this band and they said, well, you're too good. And I'm like, fuck you. What are you talking about? You're too smooth. I'm like, fuck you. Like, really? Yeah. You're going to give me that? Like, I'm too good. Fuck you.
Right. Right.
So, there was this period where you were kind of like frowned on if you didn't have, or if you had technique or you knew what you were doing.
That's
like,
interesting.
Oh, no, this is a punk band, man.
It's
right?
So real, bro.
Yeah.
When I was a punk rock baby, because, my sister's like, 16 years older than me. My brother's 13 years older. They raised me. They were, San Fernando Valley, like, gutter punk kids growing up.
Right,
okay.
And so, I went to, like, backyard shows as a little kid and all that shit. And I'm like, sorry, the Zoom keeps cutting out and I can barely hear you guys.
Oh.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I can hear you just
fine.
Yep. Coming in fine.
Okay. Because when I start to talk, I can't. Okay, trust the process. So yeah, the punk rock thing is so real though, because there were bands that be coming up and people would be like, "Yo, we can't trust the process." People would be like, "Yeah, they're not as cool though because they're playing a lot of like actual like notes." Right. And people would say things like that. Like my sister and friends would come around and be like, "We were like whatever," and then people would try to tell me like, "Yeah, no, these guys aren't as cool as so and so because they can kind of play." The Minutemen.
Yeah.
When the Minutemen came around, I was like, "Oh, this is what I've been looking for." And everybody's like, "That's not even really punk rock." And I was like, "How is this not the most punk thing in history?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that was that distinction. They were like, they played really good after about the second record, I felt like.
And they were, the Minutemen were a great band. That was a great band. That dude was a great guitar player.
Yeah.
Like, and to me, there's this weird thing that happens with me too, where like a lot of times people will talk about a band, and they'll say King Crimson for one, right? Mm-hmm. They'll say, "Oh, but the early stuff. Oh, but you got to listen to the early stuff." And like I go listen to the early stuff, and I'm like, no, that's not it. I like them 2-3 records in when they really know what they're doing and they got it down. Yeah. And they get in there and they're not fucking around jamming or, they're in there and they're like, okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, or in King Crimson's case, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But there's this thing that I really, okay, Bowie's Space Oddity, right?
Yes.
Okay, Space Oddity is a song, classic tune ahead of its time.
Yes.
But the rest of that record, and the record before that, right?
Yeah.
And then later on, here he comes Ziggy and Aladdin Sane and that, he really finds his feet.
Yeah.
And those are the records that really turn me on. As opposed to like, but you always meet these people who are like, "Oh, but the early stuff. And I'm like, right?
Right. No, I get you.
The Dylan thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
The folky Dylan, right? I get it. I understand it. I'm not denigrating it in any way, right? but it does nothing for me. Like those lyrics, I mean, you hear those lyrics and you think, and it's just like, holy shit, how did he do that? And but the stuff that he did later on, where he's got like Knopfler playing guitar and producing, or Daniel Lanois playing guitar and producing for him, right?
Dude.
I mean, that Time Out of Mind record, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like that is just like, because then you've got the Dylan lyrics. And you've got this amazing bed of music that he's on top of.
Yes.
And to me, that's just like, oh, get out of here, man. Like,
yeah. No, I totally agree.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think that comes from not being stuffy about, where you're learning stuff from, just having an open mind about where you receive information. You can have favorites of eras of things, and you can have favorite styles and genres, but just closing your mind to go like, oh, I don't like punk, or the opposite of like, that's too many notes, you're too good. And it's like, you could look at somebody like Jocko coming from a bass player's perspective, and it's like, there's some stuff he did where it's like, as far as attitude wise, and it might not sound like punk because it's not like there's distorted guitars happening. Some of the stuff he plays,
but the way jazz records, the stuff in New York.
There's one concert he did. I think he was playing with Joni Mitchell. It was like Santa Barbara Bowl, I think it was. It was in the Jocko documentary.
Sure.
He had a looper and like a chorus vibrato thing, and he did a loop, like a dissonant loop, and he went doo 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 doo, and then he went up and like to like almost like a tritone, like and he looped it, and he just was like doing the robot, and I'm like, that is some punk rock shit. And he's like dancing around, and then he turns on the vibrato, and he's just soloing over it, like, yeah, this is fine. And it's like, the one in Germany where he's, at the end of his solo, he hits a big like A harmonic, and he throws his bass up in the air, and he just lets it come down and hit the stage and doesn't bother to try and catch it. And it's like, dude, it's like, just because he doesn't have a mohawk doesn't mean that it's not totally punk rock.
And the thing you got to remember is jazz people were like a little freaked out by that. There were a lot of jazz people who were just like, wow, you can't do that. What are you doing? But he was just like, fuck you, James Brown. And Jimi Hendrix, and
Jerry Jamont,
you know what I mean. It's all in there, and then but then you listen to like him, the bass line on "Come On, Come Over" when he's in the groove, right? And he's playing those Rocco 16th notes, and you're just like, just like
it's the B section of that tune for me when he goes into the boom and all that, like
that's the stuff. That's the stuff.
The main lick is cool, but when he switches into that, that's when it just gets into overdrive.
On a fretless bass, when nobody even knew what a fretless electric bass was, a fucking Fender that he just ripped the frets out with a pair of needle nose pliers. That's how he made that bass.
No, he talks about that on his instructional thing with Jerry Jamont. He's like, took a knife and got some boat epoxy, and I just ripped the frets out of my bass.
Boat epoxy.
Which I was researching because being batty here at home in quarantine, I was like, I have a bass that I could rip the frets out of, but I've had the presence of mind to like, well, let me Google this, and then I read in a couple different places, he actually had to take that to dude.
This is
nice.
this is my original. This is the first bass I ever bought, and it is a mid '70s P bass with a factory fretless neck on it.
Oh man.
Yeah, and I used to. I used to play.
How much you want for it?
I used to play shows with that back in Florida. I would play like in orchestra, like pits, for musicals and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I played that bass, and they loved it because it sounds like an upright. You can really make it sound like an upright, but you don't have to have an upright.
Right. Yeah.
And so I use that bass a lot I probably have made more money playing that bass than any other instrument that I own.
Really?
Yeah. I made a lot of money playing that bass. But it was cool because it was like pit. They were like pit gigs. So, playing musicals, man, dude, that's my favorite thing of all. That's my favorite kind of gig, is playing a musical, because they cover all the styles.
Yeah.
There's going to be some challenging keys. There's going to be some shit in D flat. There's going to be some shit in A flat, guaranteed, because those are vocal keys. People, vocalists like those flat keys.
Yeah.
You're going to have to play an up tempo. You're going to have to play the boom chick 2-beat thing. And then you're probably, I did one musical that was like all these 70s disco tunes. They're Playing Our Song, I think is what it was called. And it was like all these it was like the story of Burt Bacharach in a musical, Yeah. It was really weird.
Finally.
Yeah. Finally. It's like the one we're all waiting for. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Love, Sweet Love, the musical.
There you go.
Yeah. No, and that's the other thing about you, too, that I think speaks to, who you are as a musician, is that I've seen you just either gigs that you post about or happen to be working them, and you'll turn up in any situation. So jazz big band, and I'm, doing stagehand stuff at a theater, and then you show up, and then it's like, oh yeah, it's like if I could just get a gig where I just play 7th and ninth chords all night, I would
quarter
be
notes.
Doing the dung 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 dung, all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, that would be the best. And then the next thing, oh yeah, Grease the musical, and then who do I see in the orchestra pit? It's like, oh hey, Mark, what are you doing? It's like, oh yeah, no, I love that, and exactly what you were saying. It's just you're not, you have no qualms about jumping into any situation that you feel like you're suited for, and that's awesome.
Yeah, rhythm guitar in a reggae band is like my ultimate. That's like the best. That would be my best gig. Playing 2 and 4.
Yeah.
All night. Night.
Yeah. So what you're saying is we're gonna do a jam set where Davey will be on guitar, it'll be a 2-guitar thing, it'll be reggae, and then I'll bring a bunch of pedals and try to do my best Bill Laswell imitation, and then we'll just go for the whole reggae dub thing all night.
How's that? You got into some Bill? Did you start listening to some Laswell?
Yeah, no, I've been listening to Bill, and just and not only that, like not just his stuff, but like I'm a huge P-Funk fanatic, as we've gone over a bunch of times on the podcast.
Yeah.
He's done work, he did a crazy record with them in the 90s that I had never heard of before, and I was like, what is this madness?
He's everywhere. Bill Laswell.
Yeah, well, and that, and a lot of, you just mentioned him, Daniel Lanois. I've been diving into him for just nonstop for the past, I don't know,
is unreal.
5 or 6 months. Like, that guy is on another level. And it started with, I got back into gaming being stuck at home, and I didn't have time with it before. And I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, yeah.
And he did the whole soundtrack for that. And
I liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't play the game, but I liked the music.
Yeah, and that's in the past. That's how I found out about a lot of music that I like, is just through movies or games or just hearing it around in the world. And I'm like, oh, who's doing that? And I looked up the soundtrack and who did it, and I looked him up, and I was already on a Peter Gabriel kick, listening to crazy and diving into Tony Levin, and I found out, oh, he produced that, and he played guitar on Sledgehammer. And I'm like, who is this dude? And then just diving into his production stuff.
It goes all the way back to the Joshua Tree, right? The Joshua Tree and the Unforgettable Fire. Like, he did all that shit. So, he's in a recording studio in Berlin with Eno.
Yes.
And The Edge.
Yeah.
And they're just like, okay, let's see what happens here. So, he definitely... I saw him... at one point in time, I saw him down in Silver Lake, because he lives in Silver Lake. And so I saw him do a show, which was like just him and that guy Rocco, the slide player. And it was just, and then it was like he's like, oh, I like coming down the hill and playing a show. Spaceland was the name. Remember that club, Spaceland?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember Spaceland.
And so he was up there, and then all of a sudden he just says, I think I'll play pedal steel. And he sits down at the pedal, right? And he sits down at the pedal steel, and he starts doing that Lanois thing on the pedal steel. And he's just like, ah. And that was the moment. That was the moment that I decided that I was going to play pedal steel. Like,
really?
I got to get one of those, and I have to, find out what's happening there.
Yeah. Well, that's actually really cool to know about, just knowing you personally and seeing you play pedal steel on so many gigs, or playing gigs with you where you've done the pedal steel thing.
Yeah,
and
the problem is I don't ever get to do that. Like pedal steel,
No.
you always end up having
Right.
to do having to do the country thing, which is fine.
Yeah.
Because, like, again, it goes back to what we were talking about. Like, you have to learn that. You gotta be able to do that, and then you can throw all that out and start putting delays and choruses and all of that other stuff on there, and then you have this foundation to go from. And that's what sort of carries me through all the different style gigs, playing big band jazz guitar or playing, because I could do that big band jazz shit, I got to play for Don Rickles for like 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sick.
It's Don Rickles, man. Are you kidding me? It's
Yeah.
Rickles.
Yeah, right.
Like genuine Rat Pack dude.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
yeah, and I think me and Davey, I think I can speak for you as well.
Mr. Warmth.
Yeah, Mr. Warmth, exactly.
Mr. Warmth.
We gotta touch on this for a second. So, how did that gig come about, more specifically, and what was that gig like as far as being on the bandstand and that whole environment?
Noval. It was Bob Noval.
Okay.
Bob Noval got the contract for that gig somehow. I don't know. And when he gets a gig, he calls me to play it. And I was like, are you kidding? He's like, well, I don't know how good the money is. I'm like, I would pay you for this gig. I didn't really say that, but
no,
so we did the Canyon Club, and then we did the Canyon Club twice, and then we did the Saban Theater in Beverly Hills, and that was cool. That was like a birthday show of his. And the first night that we played, the bass player, I'm down there, and the bass player, this guy Kirk, who he uses all the time, who's an amazing bass player. He said, oh man, he says, you got that long red hair, man. Rickles might, like, you got to be careful. Rickles might, like, he might light into you or something. I'm like, dude, it would be the highlight of my life to be shredded by Rickles on stage. Are you kidding me? It would be like the highlight of my life. So he comes out, and there was this woman who played Barry sax. And she was like a teacher, high school English teacher or something like that, right? And she was sitting on the end, and so he's coming out, and he walks past her, and he looks, and he says, "Oh, look, they got a hooker for the band," and just walks up to the stage, and the whole band just kind of falls out on the floor.
Yeah,
like it was amazing. It was like he hadn't even got to the mic yet. He said, "Oh, look, they got a hooker. They got a hooker for the band." We were just like, "Holy shit! Oh man!" And but what was interesting was, like, he was very old, right, at that time, and he had some health problems. He had some problems with his legs, and he was using a walker. So he didn't want to come out with the walker.
No.
Right, in front of the audience. So he would come out, and the curtains would be closed, and he would come out with the walker, and he's like, kind of getting up to the chair, and there was a big chair there. So he sat down in the chair. And the guy takes the walker away, right? And he's just this little old man sitting there in his chair, right? And the curtain opens, and motherfucking Don Rickles shows up right then, man. He just like, boom, hey, hockey puck, what is that? Your wife? Sorry to hear it. What are you doing over there? Boom, bing, 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 bing. Like amazing to watch that, like, just happen right in front of you, And then the last gig that we played with him, my wife said, you need to meet him, because he would say hello to us or whatever, but you didn't really talk to him or anything, because he was a busy guy. And
right.
So the last gig, he had a manager. Tony O was the guy's name, I think, and I said. I said, hey, man, do you think it would be possible for me to meet him afterwards? He says, and Tony said, he was one of those guys from Vegas who had, like, the tan pants and the shoes and socks that were the exact same color. Like no matter, like, everything he wore was the exact same color. You know what I mean? Like, he was one of those guys. He says, I'll see what I could do. I'll see if I can make it happen. And I was like, okay, great.
Wow.
Great. And so then right after the show, I'm getting ready to pack up, and he says, oh, come on. And so Don was sitting on the side of the stage, and he was like, Don, this is the guitar player. He wants to meet you. And so I got to hang out with Don Rickles for like 5 minutes, shook his hand and like we had a little conversation. He was a super nice guy, just, the sweetest guy. And then what was really weird was I was packing up and I walked backstage and I turned the corner and ran right into Bob Newhart. Because those guys.
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah, well, those guys.
Yeah, they were
old friends. Like they were friends for years and years, which is just such a weird combination of guys. But there you go. But yeah, like I turned the corner and there was Bob Newhart, and I was like, oh hey, what's doing?
Yeah, can't beat it. It's like, who else would you want to see when you turn around after talking to Don Rickles?
Yeah,
it's like that's the perfect pairing.
Yeah, that was, and it was, like his. It was weird because we would play those gigs and I would tell people that I was doing the gig and they would be like, Don Rickles has a band, and I'm like, yeah, man, he's like a, he's like a vaudeville guy. He like, he did the, yeah. There was one thing he would do. He would do this like this sort of Japanese skit, and we would have to play these like this like ding 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 ding, right? And I like lean over to the bass player and I'm like, can a chart be racist?
Right.
Can a chart be racist? I'm not sure. Like, there was like one or two things that he would do that were kind of like,
right.
We should have stopped this part of that.
You would think, you would think that like somebody would say at some point in time, like, "Hey, Don, Don, maybe we need to revamp this a little bit."
Yeah,
but yeah, it was a little.
yeah. It's like, is it possible? Well, we're about to find out. 2, 3.
But you know what? Like that's Rickles, man. Rickles, like that's Rickles. I mean,
right.
Yeah. He's not pulling any punches. I mean, he took. I think it was him that told us. No, I think it was the piano player was telling me this story. I think it was Rickles that told. He was talking about coming out of a club, or he said something like, "Oh yeah, Frank Sinatra saved my life one night. Like these two guys were beating the shit out of me, and Frank comes out of the back door of the club and he says, 'That's enough, guys.'"
Yeah, get it, team?
Right. I was just like, oh man.
Right.
Yeah, that's a true Frank Sinatra story, baby.
Yeah. That's enough, guys.
Right.
God damn.
Yep.
Yeah, he was, but that was like such a cool like gig, and all the guys in that band, like all the guys that he would hire for those gigs were like top shelf guys.
I'm sure.
There were some rehearsal bands down in the valley that I was going to for a while too, like to keep those chops up, and it would be like all these really heavy sax players like in the front row playing,
right.
And like me, I'm just playing quarter notes in the background, and the guy would say, "Hey man, you want to take a solo on this?" And I would be like, "No fucking way." Like, no, thank you. Like, I'm perfectly happy back here just strumming away.
Right.
and there would be these guys who would come in and like they would like and I actually had a conversation with the band leader about this. And these guys would come in and they would like, they didn't say anything to anybody. They didn't talk to anybody. They had their hat, and they had their horn, and they would come in and they would open up their horn and they would sit down and then they would just play. And then the thing was over and they would pack up and they like didn't say nothing to nobody. And he was like, yeah, that's kind of an old school thing. Like that's like an old OG jazz thing that those guys, they don't really, they don't talk to anybody. They don't say anything to anybody.
The fucking creeper?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
skulk in and skulk away?
Yeah.
I mean, hey, whatever. I mean, I call it like I see it. I mean, if you're going to sneak in and not say what's up to anybody, like even me with my social disorders knows that's not appropriate. You wouldn't say what's up to at least one person.
No, I mean, like if you said hello to them, they would give you the nod, or they would say, "Hey, what's up?" or whatever, but they were just like they were not there to socialize. They were they were there to play those charts. They were there to play, and then when they were, then that was it.
God, that's indicative of a whole.
It makes sense
era.
in a way too, though.
What's that?
When gig was like manual labor,
Yeah. Well, I was talking with somebody. I was talking with Lee Madelon about this.
Yeah.
How,
Name
like,
drop.
Yeah, well, I only said that because you guys all know.
I mean,
yeah.
But like, how that back,
one of the best.
Like those guys come from this time when you would play 3 or 4 or 5 nights a week, right? That was your job, and you would go, you would play the gig, then you would come home, you bought a house, you bought a car, you put your kids through college, playing gigs, right? Going out and playing 4, 5, 6 nights a week. That's what you did for a living. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You were in the union, you had a pension, you had insurance, you had, that was how, but that was why you got the players that you got from that jazz scene. Because those guys were playing 4, 5, 6 nights a week for
so much.
years. For years. And so then you got players like Dexter Gordon and you got these, right?
My hero.
I mean, you got those guys who could play like that because that's what they did for a living, right? That was what they did.
Oh,
yeah.
So, and that's gone. That's gone.
Right.
For better or for worse, whatever. I don't want to say. I don't necessarily think it does any good to sort of pine for the good old days or anything like that. But,
No, it is what it is.
Yeah, but it was a different world. It was a very different world to be a musician, and that's why all those guys came out to L.A. because or went to New York because there were 50 clubs that had bands in them 5 nights a week.
Right. Yeah, it was. I mean, I can't speak to it like I was there, but hearing people talk about it, it was different in that because there was the infrastructure, you could hook into the infrastructure. Like you're talking about unions, 5, 6 nights a week. Clubs where it's like there's all of this stuff going on. So I think what people miss is not necessarily the good old days, but they miss some sort of having the same opportunities, even if they're not presented in the same way. It's like having that same sort of existence, somehow, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I think that to a certain degree, the gigs that, certainly like big, gigantic concerts, which are not the gigs I get, but like big, gigantic concerts, those people, that audience, okay, fine. But like generally, when you go to a club or you go to a bar and you're playing, I think that there's a lot of times when audiences don't know how to respond to live music anymore. Like, right? Like audiences.
Talking about my whole gig in life, brother.
Right? Like they don't like.
Really?
Like, no, it's okay for you to have a good time. We like that. Dance, yell. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
They don't know that like clapping is the appropriate response to a band finishing a song.
Weird but true.
Right?
100% true.
Yeah.
So what are some?
It's so funny gigs I've done where like nobody's given us any indication they liked it at all, and then as soon as you're done, it's like people are coming up and a lot of people are expressing how much they enjoyed it, and it's like, I had no fucking indication from watching you.
Yeah, right. Where were you?
Yeah.
Because this is that thing of you face me, like we face you and you face us. This is a symbiosis that occurs in my, from my point of view. I can't get to that place. It's like my general music is like I'm swimming at a certain rate in the current. I can't get deeper into myself without that audience. I need those guys, and I need them to. I need those responses that I'm used to. I grew up in the older era where I go watch my dad play with bar bands every night, all over the region. And the energy then was different than you see now in almost every setting musically, for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, we've done gigs together, you and me, where I've been like, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with these people? And then at the end, they're like, money in the tip jar.
Yeah.
But it's like, but you motherfuckers didn't dance at all.
Right.
And like, well, there's not what we do here. In the village, we don't dance. It's like, well, we need you to. Some nights.
There's a no dancing policy in this. Yeah, it's a
You're
weird
in the
thing,
village.
man.
Dancing's been forbidden.
It's a weird thing, and I think that,
it is.
I think it's it's sad because it's just like, dude, like for both of us to be getting off on that energy is really when things start really getting good.
Yeah.
When you go to a club and you see a band you really like, and you're right up on the edge of the stage, and you're like, yeah, and they're like, yeah, man, yeah, check it out,
Yeah. Well, where do you think that comes from? Because I see it as kind of a mixed bag of depending on what band you're going to go see. Not necessarily a scene, but like in a per band, that kind of thing changes. But where do you think that's coming from? Do you think it's like just a social?
What is coming from?
What you're talking about? Just the lack of like response. When you're talking about the lack of dancing and stuff like that, lack of energy.
There's a couple of places. Number one is the scarcity of gigs. Right, there's just not that many gigs, right?
Right.
And there's also this like sort of there's this like the gigs that are available they want you to play covers. They don't want you playing original music. They want you playing covers, right? Which you're never going to get the same kind of response from, right?
Right.
From the players, and the players are never going to put the same kind of energy into it. Therefore, the audience is never going to get the same kind of energy out of it, and also, I think that there's a lot of times now, places where you're playing, and this drives me crazier than most. You're like you go to and you're playing and you're moving the tables in the corner of a restaurant so you can play this gig, right? And then you start to play, and the first thing that happens is they're like, "Oh, you're too loud," and it's like you hired a rock band. Like this is like what was it that one time I went to see this was back in Florida. I went to see Dick Dale play.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So Dick Dale was playing outside on the beach, and it was a trio, and these guys came out, and I was just like, oh my God, this is punk rock. This is fucking punk rock that these guys are playing. Like and so I was thinking like. Man, if they showed up in a club in the 50s and started doing what they're doing, like, people must have lost their minds. People must have been like, you guys gotta go. You know what I mean? Like, because it was barely on the edge of control. You know what I mean? Just like, loud. The bass player was an animal, and like, you can't show up at Fresco's and do that. Right?
Can't show up to a cafe or
right?
And do that.
You couldn't do that at Butler's. I mean,
that's not what they're expecting.
That's not what they're expecting. And I
I
don't mean to denigrate those places because those places allow you a performance space, but that's not the same as a club. Right. Where there's even if small stage, like I'm not talking about big giant clubs. I'm talking about 150, 200 people, in a room with a loud band where you gotta yell to hear, right? Like there's a certain level that rock and roll has to be if it's gonna succeed. There's a certain volume level.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That good rock and roll, basically, so that everybody on the stage can hear themselves over the drums. That's essential, right? Like the drums sort of set the stage for that.
Oh, yeah, at the very least.
Right.
Yeah, it's the foundation. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's on stage, and that's an acoustic instrument, and you kind of got to be louder than that, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, and that's where when you get into like, a concrete room. The concrete dining room of a restaurant. Right. That it's got nowhere to go. That's got no place to go. There's nothing,
Yeah. No, dude, you hit the nail on the head of just that frustration of you hire a band, and not even you hired like the Ramones tribute band. You did not. You did not hire some loud. You hired like this is the band. You saw what we do. You saw what we play, and even like the volume is respectable, and it's just still like this is just way too loud. It's like, well, what did you think was going to happen when you brought a band in here?
Right. And we're not a jukebox. We're not a jukebox. Right. And the other thing is, I mean, and I'm a good enough musician that I can read the room. Like I look at a room and I know I know whether I'm going to go ahead and play Alice Cooper's "I'm 18" or whether I'm going to go ahead and play, some Crosby, Stills and Nash. Right? I mean, I get it. Like I figured that out. Like, all right, I see what's happening here. People want to eat dinner. They're not looking for a bloodbath. And
right.
So,
Bloodbath.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Like all of a sudden okay, we're gonna do our Black Flag set while they serve your appetizers.
Yeah. Right.
know,
They start flipping the tables.
I mean, there is something to be said for that. But like even if you're playing like this little, you got a nice little jazz trio or quartet or something like that, the drummer has got to be able to, hit that ride, right there. And so right there, you got a certain level of sound that's got to happen.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, or a saxophone. Saxophones are loud, man.
Yeah. And loud is not uncomfortable necessarily. There is just as far as my experience doing sound, that you can have something loud enough to where it's like, decibel level, you might be hitting a certain place, but depending on everyone's tone, how they're playing together,
that's right.
all of that, loud is not necessarily uncomfortable. So you can have something loud to where you might have to be talking in a little bit of like a shout or a little bit of a raised voice or something like that. But I think people just automatically, once it hits a certain point without even listening to it, they just, this is just too much. And it's like, well, not necessarily. It's like you kind of have to read you have to read the room in the opposite direction, sometimes
right.
and go,
yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. But like I said, I think that there are a lot of people who just have so little experience with live music that they don't know. There's going to be, and I think when we're talking about volume, but I think a lot of times it may just be the energy level, like the level of energy that comes from a band as opposed to one that comes from a stereo in the corner. Right. This level of like, wow, look, there's real people playing instruments. Oh my God, what's going on? And I think that catches people off guard. I see it all the time. You start playing and like people don't know what to make of it. And it's just because there's so little opportunity for people to see live music.
Right. Yeah. I don't. It's an interesting problem. But this does bring up a question in my mind, and I've had this happen on some gigs. One gig that I was doing with you. Those moments where you get the it's the best way to describe it is the Spinal Tap first, then puppet show moments where you're playing a gig and then somebody comes up, and then they just go like, "Hey, stops you mid song because they have to do a raffle for the foundation to fight blindness and boll weevils or something like that." It's just like, couldn't you wait till the end of the song? So, do you have any good ones that come to your mind that like inopportune moments or things like that?
I remember I was playing a gig and I was playing a solo. I was in the middle of a solo and. I don't like to toot my own horn, but it was a good fucking solo that I was playing,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
This guy is standing right in front of me, yelling at me, going, "Who played that song? Who played that song? Who played?"
Oh
right?
God!
And finally, I just stopped playing, and I looked at him and I said, "I'm a little busy. Could you come back in about But and then of course it was gone. You know what I mean? The whole moment was blown.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't believe it. Like he was just yelling at I'm like he doesn't realize that there's a person doing something in front of him.
Yeah.
And I think that's
part
part
of what... Yeah, you gotta know right now, bro.
Yeah, part of what we're talking about. Like, they're so used to be able to just, go up to the box and turn it down or make whatever they want to have happen. Whereas now it's you've got people.
Yeah.
I think it's 110%. Like, if I want to say real quick, it's like, I think that people these days, what little live music they do experience, it's like, imagine they're watching it. It's all, like YouTube footage anyway.
Yes.
So just imagine how you interact with that versus the band. Like, it totally makes sense what you're saying. I've seen it too in recent gigs, like recent years. People really don't know how to react because they don't have control over the input.
Right.
Which they're so used to.
Right.
They can't just click pause. And it's not 2-dimensional. It's like 4-dimensional, especially if you're playing good and loud. So it's like, I've seen it. God, we did a gig at Kinetic with Benny. one of our early band gigs that we did together a couple years ago. And it's like, Connecticut's always a good crowd of people, but we were just coming with so much weird shit. I remember we covered a Primus tune and stuff like that. People were like, what the fuck is going on there? Wrong place to get really loud, too. If you remember, it's all like tanks and stuff and like exposed beams. And so it's just like everything you play sounds just like echoes.
A lot of hard surfaces in that place, man.
Yeah, concrete brewery and, people drinking beers and eating, fried pickles and stuff like that.
Big open brew pub, concrete floors. You just imagine all of you acoustic engineers. It was a fucking nightmare. You don't play Primus and that kind of shit. You just don't.
City, baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was always that. There was always that. It was just Bravery was that way too, right? Bravery had that back wall where there was this one slap back that was happening no matter what time you were playing, no matter what tempo you were playing at. There was this,
Can I say playing inside at Bravery was one of the hardest cover gigs I ever played. I played there like twice with Mel. And it was like each time I couldn't hear anybody's anything because it was like playing inside of a squash court. Yeah. It's weird that we got here, but it's honestly like that's how bad it was. It was like amplifiers inside of a racquetball court bad. So bad.
What was I gonna say about we were talking
I miss playing live, I think.
I do too, and I hate playing live, but I miss it.
I do too.
right. It's like, but every gig you've ever had is that way. Every gig you're always just like, why the fuck did I take this gig? Until you get there, and then it's cool. You know what I mean? Then you're just like setting up and you start playing, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, all right, I'm fine. But until you get there, you're like, I can't believe I decided to play this gig.
Right.
Well, absolutely, bro. Almost without exception. Yeah. Every time to drive there, I'm like, what the fuck is this? No matter how much the money is, it's just like, what? Why did I do this today? Why did I say today?
Yeah. One of my.
And then you get there, and especially if it's like you cats or people I've known, then it's like that changes the dynamic for sure.
Then you're good.
Yeah, because it's one thing to play with super talented people like y'all, but to be like, oh, I know you guys, I'm friends with you guys, like that always calms me down because everything else is input too. It's like, I show up to perform for people, but it's just like you said about Dawn, it's like until we start, I don't switch on to like the person that entertains people. Until then, I'm just anxious, like I'm just like a cat. I'm just like the most anxious fucking like cat in the world. I'm just like everything is just driving me crazy. Like Jesse knows, he's seen it. I'm like, so it's a factor in every situation.
Well, and I think that's another factor that people don't necessarily think about. That there's this thing that happens on stage, but then there's the rest of your life. Like the thing that you're seeing happening on stage is the result of a whole line of events that started when I was 8 or 9 and got that first guitar. You know what I mean? Like that
yes.
Like there's this thing that like it's the culmination. It's the culmination. It's not the event. And like getting spacey. Like when I start to get spacey, it's because I've played enough gigs that it's like, okay, let's go out on this limb. Like, okay, it'll be all right. I trust I trust you as a bass player, and I trust the drummer is going to hold it down. And I trust that the other guitar player or the keyboard player is going to come with me. And all right, let's go out here and let's, and then, but there are other bands, if it's a band of guys that I don't know, then I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably going to play it a little safer,
Right.
It's, like I said, I remember doing one of these Guitarcraft things with Fripp. And so we sit down and you would one of the cool things was you got to spend about 10 minutes with him every day. So you got like this little 10-minute lesson with Fripp every day, So we sat down and he was showing me this exercise, and it's a really hard one. And he says, oh, and so then finally I kind of got my head around it, and I was like, oh, you mean like this? And he says, oh yeah, that's it. Now it's just thousands of hours of practice.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's right. That's what it is. Right? You got it in your hands. Now it's just thousands of hours of practice. But that's what people are seeing when they see the band play. They're seeing all those guys who did all that practicing, who did all that work to get to that point. It's not like we just like woke up this morning and decided, oh, I'm going to pick up a guitar and go do this tonight.
Right. Well, and that's and by the same token of that, that's where I get upset when when people talk about an audience in a live perspective, and just because during normal times, just working all these shows and seeing all these different bands on tour and like just seeing all of these different variety of professional musicians, every day, every week, just watching them play. And then people saying, people kind of the same way where someone would go like, oh, I don't, you're playing too good, or you're playing too many notes, or I don't want to learn theory. So because that's going to like stifle my creativity, or I'm going to sound like, I'm going to start writing classical music now or something like that. I've heard people talk about audiences and they go, oh, well, they just don't understand what, this music is. And it's like, well, it's that, they just don't understand what we're doing. They just don't understand what we're doing. And it's what you're talking about, to where it's like, yeah, if you've practiced a lot and you've done all of this hours of, work into something, it's like the audience might not be able to go, oh, yeah, you're playing a C major 7 with a sharp 9 chord there and you played it really well. It's like, no, but if you can know how to guide your performance and what you're doing, like when you saw Daniel Lenoir, he's not thinking about that either, but he's guiding the audience through a moment and they're on that journey with him.
That's
and
right.
It's, people will know what's good and what's not good, whether or not, as far as why people's social reaction to a performance is one way or the other, or an environment might not be conducive for it, or, somebody doesn't take the hint to not yell at you about, when did this song come out, or who's playing on the liner notes of it in the middle of your solo. But it's, I don't know. It's that guy. Yeah. It's, you got to think about the audience knows what's good and what's not good, even if they can't explain why.
Right. That's right. That's right. They do. And it's really not about like, a lot of notes or technical prowess or anything like that. I mean, which is what that guy was talking about when he talked about the golden calf of technique.
Yeah, yes.
I remember when I was first starting and I was learning some Muddy Waters tunes, right? Muddy was kind of the guy for me for the blues, like that electric Chicago blues thing for me. That was the shit that really got me interested in playing blues. And I don't remember what song it was, but there was this tune, and I was trying, there was this lick that he would play with the slide, and I was just like, God damn, like it took me forever to figure out this lick, and when I finally figured it out, I couldn't believe that was all there was to it, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he's playing two notes, but the way he played those two notes said everything.
Yeah.
And like that was like a real sort of, penny drop for me when it came to blues. Was like, oh, it's not about, it's about, like B.B. King does that, and you know who it is, you know what's happening, you got the context, you got everything in. Right?
Yeah,
right. Right? And this thing that Muddy did, it was just this with the slide, and you were just, but it was like eons of oppression in this like, just like, oh my God, get out of here.
Yeah.
That's real though.
Yeah,
and
that's absolutely real.
It was so real. And that's, and like, just as much as I like to watch somebody really shred, to watch somebody like, just if it's real, if the emotion is there, you know what I mean?
Right.
If they're able to get that feeling across, then you're just kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
The first time I saw Jeff Beck, I was at I came to the Jeff Beck train late in life, and I was at the House of Blues. He was at the House of Blues, right? And there was this big crowd, and these two big biker guys were standing behind me, right? These gigantic dudes, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're the first time you saw him. Oh, you're gonna love it, man. We saw him last night in Vegas. It's great."
Yeah, right.
And it was like Jeff Beck, Pino Palladino's playing bass, Vinny Colaiuta's playing drums. And his boy was playing keyboards. I forget what the guy's name is. The guy, but so Jeff is playing, and there was one point in time where he plays this lick, and he's got his hand on the trem bar and his pinky's on the volume knob and he's moving up the neck, but the notes are going down. And it's just, and I've been watching guitar players for 30 years. I know what they're doing, whether I can do it or not. I know what's happening. I had no idea what was happening. And I just went like this. I went, oh my God, like this. And one of the bikers grabs me by the shoulder and he says, "It'll be all right, man." And I was like that was like, to me, that was just like, what is he doing? How is he doing that? How is he making that sound? Like, how is that possible? You know? And like, I still get those moments when you see somebody, you know, the last time I saw Dweezil, like Dweezil is playing like just like beyond. He is playing beyond.
Yeah, he's on it.
He really is. Yeah,
homie is on it.
You know, I met him a couple of times, and he said, dude, I spent 2 years in a room learning how to play like Frank, trying to learn how to play like Frank. He says, I still don't have it down, but he said, I spent 2 years like just sitting in a room doing this, trying to, you know, figure that out so that he could do that. You know what I mean? So like, when you see that band, it's not, you know, it's not like there's not a shit ton of work that went into that, because there is. I mean, think about playing Frank's stuff, you know?
Right. And he talks about it, but you can tell there's just so much that goes into it. You know, he only gives you the basic techniques of like, this is how you kind of would get close to possibly emulating that. But it's not even, it's, you know, like,
a friend of mine is playing drums in that band, and he told me he's like, oh yeah, we're rehearsing on the bus, we're on the bus.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, and there's stories of the Allman Brothers, you know, who you wouldn't think would be a really super rehearsed band, but there's stories of those guys rehearsing on the way to the gig. You know, or like
Live at the Fillmore. Live at the Fillmore is tight. Tight.
Yeah, it is.
That's a tight band on that record.
Yeah. With 2 drummers and 2 bass players, and super tight.
No.
Speak on that. Think about old PAs. Think about the equipment they were using to be that tight. That record's furious.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, that's a mind-blowing thing, because that's one of my favorite bands and albums of all time. Just, you know, getting into that whole side of music. And to me, it's like some of those pockets of what they're doing is pure brilliance in the most understated and just American organic way of brilliance, to where it's the same way that a Ford pickup truck from the 50s is brilliant, you know. It's like, you know, and you listen to that music, and I didn't know getting into it they had 2 drummers at first. It's like, I didn't know. And then I looked up like either live footage of them playing or saw pictures of it, and I went, well
who's that guy?
Who's that guy? Because I knew Butch Trucks was there.
Derek's
I didn't know that there was another fucking drummer there. And then I went back and listened to Fillmore East, and my mind was blown because I heard things that I wasn't hearing before. I thought it was just him playing, and then I went, "Oh my god!"
About those guys is they didn't make it a thing. You know what I mean? They did it because it did the thing they wanted it to do. You know, not because let's have 2 drummers because it's weird. They did it because we need 2 drummers because we want this polyrhythmic bed underneath. You know, whatever it is that we're doing. You know, I wasn't a big Allman Brothers fan. I'll come clean on that.
Sure.
But a couple of years ago,
you're forgiven.
We did an Allman Brothers tribute at Neil Stock with Joel Hatcher and Peter.
Rest in peace.
Peter Kay is a big Allman Brothers fan, and Joel was too. So we did it. We like, you know, got in and dug into those tunes and like really learned them. And like I had a whole new respect for those guys. Like I was like, oh, I get it now. And you know, we had who's the drummer? Pete was playing drums, and the guy that used to play for the Tone Wranglers. What was that guy's name? You know, Allie's husband.
Oh, Matt?
No.
Oh, Lionel.
Yeah, Lionel's, but it was like they were friends with him. I think it was like, I forget what his name is now.
But he played for the Tone Wranglers. It wasn't Johnny Z, was it?
No, it wasn't Johnny Z. It was somebody else. But
Yeah.
anyway, like two drummers, man, when they would like lay into it and start really laying it down, it was like,
right.
Like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like when they're really playing together, it was like, oh wow, that's like a freight train, man. That's a train coming down the track. Like get
Right.
out the way.
Right.
You know, so that was a cool thing. And they had the whole taping thing too, which I never knew.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know that they had that whole like section for the tapers and the swapping and of the tapes of the live shows and all that stuff like the Grateful Dead do. And I never knew they did that.
Yeah, no, they really embrace the whole bootleg thing. And that's the funny thing about them is like the Dead, you know, they definitely were kind of the originators of all of that. Even I would say pre-Allman Brothers, you know, but they came along and I think it was just something where they don't get the credit for that kind of stuff. I think that they should, because there's this weird like, oh, I don't listen to like Southern rock thing, or it's like you have this preconception about what it is, and it's like, no, it's like, to me, listening to that, and maybe this is my trying to be more poetic and reading into things more than I need to be, but I look at it, it's like when this weird American Southern thing meets like free your mind psychedelic hippie culture, and it blends in this weird way of like, it all comes together with you sitting by a river looking out at the sunset, like listening to Blue Sky, and it's like, I fucking get it. It's like, it's all okay. You know, and it's you listen to, it's all good.
Wow.
And Davey's probably rolling his eyes right now, but like
blowing my mind right now, man.
Right. No, I'm just saying, man. It's you listen to that, and it's like, I feel like if you were to just peg all that as like Southern rock, then you wouldn't necessarily like, oh yeah, whatever, Midnight Rider. It's like, okay, whatever. You know, it's like, I've classic rock. You know, you can brush it off as so many things. That's going to prevent you from getting into like In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, and then hearing that like odd time. Weird B section bridge, whatever you want to call it, and all that stuff, where it's like you hear that and it like it's just,
or just you know, just some of the straight up ballads. There's a ballad on an early record of theirs called "Please Call Home" that is just it's heartbreaking too.
Yeah,
you know?
Or. Yeah, if I could play like Dwayne Allman on bass and somehow translate what he's like doing, that's, you know what I mean? It's like, if I could play anything like that just in general and like have that thing where you're tapping into some weird entity outside yourself and channeling it through your playing, like.
But listen, not to like beat a dead horse with this like elitist thing, but Dwayne Allman was a session guy. He could play anything. He could play anything. He was a great player. Like, and then he did the Allman Brothers thing and did what he wanted. And, and that was, there was I was talking to somebody the other day about Leonard Skinner, and he was talking about going to see those guys live. And he says, just like they were like fucking astounding live. Three guitars, and when Freebird came out or whatever. It's like what you were saying about the whole, like you think about Southern rock and you think about Leonard Skinner and you have this certain thing in your mind. But then, they wrote a song called Mr. Saturday Night Special, which is basically like a gun control song.
Right.
Right. Like, like, okay, and like not that those guys were gun control advocates, but they wrote that song like, hey, you know what? There's something going on here, or ooh, that smell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is like totally about addiction and substance abuse and that whole thing.
Yeah, it's deep shit.
Yeah. They're not just like singing, whatever. No,
it's not all la-di-da, we love you bullshit.
They're not all Sweet Home Alabama.
No, and well, Thin Lizzy is my example forever on that. It's like if you stop at the boys are back in. Thank you. If you stop at the boys are back in town or Jailbreak, and then that's your extent of it, it's like you are missing out, my friend. It's like stop what you're. Yeah, it's like stop what you're doing. go pick up Bad Reputation, not
yeah,
Joan
yeah.
Jett, Thin Lizzy. Listen to the whole album and then come back to me and tell me, what Thin Lizzy's about. Or,
Bro, you take that record, you drive around all weekend, then come back and tell us how fucking cool that made you feel. Because it's inevitable. You're going to feel like a badass.
No, it is.
I don't care what you drive.
I don't care what you drive. I don't care what you drive. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It helps if it's a Trans Am, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Fucking sure does, T-Top.
Right. It's like, it could be a Honda Civic. Just pretend it's a Trans Am.
That's all right.
It could be.
Mad at you. They're not going to be
it's
mad
like,
at you.
After you listen to that record, you will want to get a stencil and paint a big Firebird on the front of your Civic and just pretend like you can drive around and be a badass.
I like it. My wife and I we have instituted a thing called Music Hour now. So right after dinner, we pick a record, we pick an album, and we listen to an album, one album.
Yeah.
And then usually she wants to go and watch some videos. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But first thing you got to do is you got to listen to the album. And you don't watch anything on TV. You don't do anything. You sit in and listen to an album. Because that's how you used to listen to records, right? You would put the album on. And the first time you moved was to turn it over. And then,
right.
And then that was it. Like you put the headphones on and you fired up the joint and you fucking listened to Dark Side of the Moon from start to finish as an album, as a piece of music.
Right.
So we've kind of, like the Cars. The other night we were listening to the Cars' first record. How good is that record? Ooh. I mean, come on, man. That's like as near perfect an album as you can get.
Yeah,
it's just everything is perfect.
Yeah, right.
Or what did we listen to one night? We were listening to a Talking Heads record. It was a Talking Heads thing, Just come on, man.
Doesn't even matter which one. They're all fucking flawless to me, man.
Great.
Doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. That is like I routinely sit and listen to Talking Heads. I must admit.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well,
I mean, it's just pound for pound, man. That songwriting, energy, they just pack that shit in, man.
Yeah, I mean,
so underrated.
there's a soft spot in my heart for Remain in Light. Remain in Light is yeah, that one really.
Take a look at these hands. Hands of a government man. Oh.
Yeah.
I swear, that whole fucking album from start to finish. I can recite all the lyrics.
On that record, man. When you listen, like at first you don't even know it's a guitar solo. It sounds like it's some kind of weird answering machine. And you're just like, oh my God, what is that? And it's Adrian Belew. It's like...
Right? Yeah. Adrian Blue's on there. Eno does some production on this record.
That's Eno. Yeah, I mean, he's all over it. And,
dude.
Yeah. And
y'all don't know, citizens, we're talking about Cross-Eyed and Painless, Remain in Light, Talking Heads. That first song is it's like one of my favorite songs ever, I think.
So great. And, not for
album,
nothing, but David Byrne is a really underrated guitar player. He's actually really, really, like what he does is always super creative and,
definitely,
perfect for the song and really interesting.
Yeah. Well, talk about getting the sound in your head out or your own vision on things. It's like there's nobody that sounds like Talking Heads. It's like when you that's its own genre or vein, really. Like as far you can't pin that into one style of music. And especially like for me, again, always trying to bring it back to P-Funk when I can. That live record with Bernie Worrell when he was in the band.
Yeah. Stop Making Sense, you talking about?
Yes.
Stop Making Sense.
Yeah, it was a concert movie, but they made a record of it as well.
Right.
I don't think he never did any studio stuff with the band, so it's just all him doing like stuff with their touring band. Yeah. That is just to me it's amazing because he adds in this other level of of funk and brings out this other and
the way he plays This Must Be the Place. Oh my fucking goodness!
Yeah, that's speaking in tongues is another really like underrated record that Bernie Worrell's all over. Bernie Worrell's all over it, and there's like it's like so funky, that record, man, and it's super like little tiny pieces fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle. Just like it's a very P-Funk, like they Bernie's on it and Steve Scales is on it, which is one of the percussionists from Parliament, and Alex Weir, the guitar player, Alex Weir is on it too. And so, I mean, 3 guys from Parliament are on that record. 3 guys from P-Funk.
Yeah.
And they're the same guys that are on the Stop Making Sense stuff. And like the parts, man, when those, like, you can't hear what each guy is doing. Like, they're so tight. Like, you can't pick out individual parts from that record. It's
Exactly.
It's one unit.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what great bands do. I feel like, regardless of genre, but that one.
And they were also like they were really good about, like, okay, we're doing this, and if it happens to fit into what's happening and we happen to make a lot of money, great. But if it doesn't, that's okay too. But this is what we're doing. This must be the place.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of what I like. That's what I like. Is like, okay, this is what I'm doing, and if you guys like it, I'm happy. But this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's pretty much all of the people I really admire in music and people I listen to sort of have that same philosophy to a certain extent. Or even if that's not a cognizant thing in their music, that's definitely what ends up happening whenever they sit down to play or whenever they're on stage.
Right.
It's their thing, and we were talking about the Stooges earlier, and it's like, I listen to Iggy Pop, and it's like, he is not trying to fit into a vein of whatever you want him to be. He's Iggy not. Pop, Yeah,
but
it's
he's
like,
also
and
those songs, he writes great songs. You know what I mean? Because other people will take those songs and do them, and they're amazing. It's like, oh, that's a great song, and then you go look, oh, Iggy Pop wrote it. Oh, what do you know? Like all those covers that Bowie did, and
right.
I think I was listening to, I was watching that movie, Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a guilty pleasure. Fucking love that movie. Super entertaining, man. But I had a great time watching that movie. But there was this point where I'm listening and the song is playing, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? What is that? I know that song. And it turns out to be this really low, super mellow version of Hit Me With Your Best Shot by Pat Benatar that somebody did. And it's amazing because the song is great, but this girl took it and did this completely different thing with it. And, like, that's always kind of my measure of how, the quality of songwriting is like, okay, well, yeah, Rocket Man is cool. Can you make it a reggae tune and have it stand up? And yeah, you can. It'll work. Like, you can do anything to it. And it's like, Tom Waits talks about, I read an interview with
let's
him.
hear Tom Waits do Rocket Man.
Yeah, Tom Waits should do Rocket Man.
That would
but
be
where
great.
they were talking about, like, well, how do you decide what songs end up on the record? He says, well, you got to turn them loose and beat them up and get them bloody, and then the ones that come back for more, those are the ones that you put on the record.
Yeah.
What an evocative non-answer.
Yeah.
No, he's the king of those, man. I love hearing his whole perspective on songwriting and just his.
I love that guy.
Yeah, no, and it's like, he'll, Dave Letterman asks him a question. He's like, so I don't really know much about your history. Tell me, about how you grew up. And he's like, oh, my mother was an exhaust manifold, and my father, my father was an exhaust manifold, and my mother was a tree. And he just says that in his straightforward, like, I'm serious. And then he just, stare, like, and then now you talk. And then it's just like.
He was on Fernwood tonight, and he had a bottle of, like, Harvey's Bristol Cream. He's drinking right out of the bottle, right?
Yeah.
And Martin Mull says, oh, I see you're drinking. He says, well, I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And me growing up on Dr. Demento, when I heard him say that, I was wow. Oh, that's where that song came from. It's like they stole that, they took that line, or either he borrowed that line or they borrowed it off of him. I don't know, but.
Wow, Dr. Demento. I haven't heard that in a while.
Oh, well, that's
I think that's
it comes up in these halls often.
Oh, yeah. I think that's where I first heard Devo. I think that's where I got turned on to Devo.
Really?
That was the first place I ever heard Devo. Yeah. Jocko Homo. Like that first record, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was another quarantine listen, early part of quarantine.
Oh, yeah. That's a good call. I haven't listened to that in a long time. Maybe my wife and I'll have to put that on the female on the record hour.
Yeah.
The music hour.
Duty Now for the Future was the one I was diving into, and I'm like, oh, this is like a nice punk rock new wave thing.
Oh yeah, and those guys were great.
And then the synth intro to the record, the Devo corporate anthem, that it's like this is.
Oh yeah.
It's like I don't know what this is, but I'm into it.
Well, remember like their version of Satisfaction. Like I still can't count it. Like I still can't figure out like what is that beat like that they're doing on Satisfaction. Yeah. You know, like I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
That's Eno produced that first record of theirs. That was
no.
That's a Brian Eno production. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, see now I need
around.
Yeah, I was gonna say now I need to dive into Eno more, man, because it's like I'm getting to him now through Daniel Lanois because I've already listened to ambient music.
Well, there's all the ambient stuff, but there's some records that he has. There's one called Nerve.net that's an amazing record. And there's another one called there's the records that he has that have songs on them are really amazing. They're amazing. Yeah. Listen to like Before and After Science. It's got like who's that bass player? The Brand X guy, Percy Jones. Mm-hmm. Percy Jones is on it, and Phil Collins playing drums.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's hardcore. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Or Another Green World is another one. That's another record that's sort of a but yeah, I like and actually I listen to a lot of his ambient stuff, and my wife is always like, I like it better when he does songs, when he sings.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
Yeah, that's all right.
So we've talked about some of the gigs that you've done, and sort of your basically overall perspective on music, and obviously swapping stories about influences and things like that. I wanted to get your take before we leave here today on what you think the best way to keep and maintain gigs are, and sort of maybe your perspective on like touring and how to do that well, because you've gone on the road with Guitar Shorty, and you've done some other I think you went to Japan like a year or two ago, and you were doing stuff in like an orchestra thing.
That was an orchestra. Yeah, we were in Japan for a month, dude. We were in Japan for 27 days, and we played 24 shows.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was brutal, man. It was brutal. And it was like, don't get me wrong, it was nice. It was like an orchestra. So we were staying in nice hotels. We got treated very well. But it was like, I think the biggest thing about the road is well, I'm not a drug guy. I'm not a drinker or a drug guy. Like, I don't do that stuff. So
right.
That doesn't really enter into it. But I definitely see how you can get in trouble with that. Like, it would be so easy because it's so boring. It's so boring. And, you're so tired all the time. You're just tired all the time because there's no way you're getting enough rest and your hours. And, you get up, but then you got to go do a sound check at 4, but the gig. And so then you're done with the sound check. Now you go eat dinner. And it's like, okay, well, let me go take a nap before the gig. But you don't really have that much time. Like an hour and a half or something like that, So you're not going to be able to go back and get a decent rest. And then you finish the gig, and it's 11:30, 12 o'clock, and you're wired. So, you're not getting to bed till 2, 3, 4. And then you got a lobby call at, 8:30 maybe?
Yeah.
Sometimes 6, depending. And then you got to get in the van, and you got to drive for, hours and hours.
Right.
So it's like, it's work, man. And I think that the most important thing for me was like trying to take care of myself, trying to like make sure that I stayed healthy, like because you're always gonna get a cold, you're always gonna get whatever. And I think playing. Depending on what you're doing, like playing, I can play sick and I'll be fine. But if I gotta sing, like it's tough to do that when you don't feel good. Like it's really hard to pull that off when you don't feel good. Like whatever you're feeling is coming out in your voice. And so if you're not up to snuff, so I think singers have it really rough on the road. I think singers, like if you're a full-time singer and you're singing, 20 songs a night or 25 songs a night, that's that's a tough gig. Like you really have to be careful. Yeah.
Definitely.
And, I noticed I would notice guys in the orchestra, or also like when I was out with Shorty, I would notice like Shorty got done with the gig and went to bed, went to his room. You know what I mean? And he stayed in his room. Like he didn't really go out and play.
Yeah.
He would every once in a while, I mean, and of course, if you get a night off, then fine, go do whatever,
Right.
But I think, for me, it's all about the gig. Like being in Shorty's band was Shorty's gig. It was his barbecue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good way to put
barbecue. And I was the rhythm guitar player. That's what I did, right?
Yeah.
And that was my gig. He would flip me a solo every once in a while, and I would bring it. But it was about making him look good, and that was the gig, and I'm okay with that. There are some guys who are not, but like I'm good with that. Like I'm good with let me play rhythm guitar, man. Because I mean, you think about it, 90% of guitar playing is rhythm.
Yeah.
The solo thing, like we spend so much time learning, playing scales and bullshit, learning how to wank. But 95% of what you do is playing chords, man. It's playing rhythm. And, like when you see a really good rhythm guitar player, it's like, like playing in those jazz bands, I would show up and they wouldn't have a guitar player. Most of the time they wouldn't have a guitar player because they just wouldn't for whatever reason. And so I would show up like the first day, and always, every time, man, the drummer would be like, dude, are you coming back next week? Like, dude, that sounds great. And all I'm doing is thump, 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 thump.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And
four on the floor.
4 on the floor. And those guys, and they love it. You know what I mean? And that's like, to me, that's, like, I would much rather play rhythm guitar. Like, that's just the coolest thing,
Yeah.
You listen to Hendrix. You listen to, when Eddie died, which was like the end of an era. Like, you listen to Eddie's rhythm parts, and it's just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like the rhythm guitar that he's playing is astounding. It's astounding. I read an article that said, Eddie's left hand got all the guys, but Eddie's right hand got all the girls. And I was just like, yeah, you're not kidding. That's exactly right.
Right. Well, and you don't think about that there's one guitar player in that band. It's you forget, even if you're a musician, you forget. And then, you watch live stuff of them playing. Like my favorite footage of them is Unchained in Oakland in like 80, 81. I think it's like 81 or 82.
Oh, that's pretty
And
early,
it's like it's like when Fair Warning just came out, and so Unchained and all those songs are like the brand new songs. Huge stage, fire, 4 kick drums, Alex Van Halen's huge setup, the whole thing. And then you're listening to the sound of it, and it's like, holy shit, this is 4 people. This is guitar, bass, and drums. And it's
and
massive.
David's only singing. David's not even playing an instrument.
Right? Yeah. Well, no, I was gonna say he's doing the splits, which is his own. That's his own instrument. Yeah.
I mean, and it's those guys, I mean, Eddie's rhythm playing or Jimmy's rhythm playing. When you listen to Hendrix play rhythm guitar, it's just like, whoa, Machine Gun or you know what I mean? When he's playing you think about Voodoo Child, like the rhythm part, the Voodoo Child, the shit he's doing in there. Like, come on, man. Like that stuff is so, and to me, that's always really the really great stuff is when those guys can play rhythm like that.
Yeah, or Killing Floor on Monterey.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Killing Floor too.
Yeah.
Even on your experience.
I love Howlin' Wolf version, but that version always gets me up, bro. It gets me up. I'm feeling something.
Yeah. Are You Experience is a great example too. Yeah. It's just you listen to that, you're like, wow.
There's a single song at Jimmy's that doesn't have fucking great rhythm though.
Yeah.
These are all great examples, but I'm like, wait till tomorrow. I mean,
Spanish Cast Magic.
Those
background vocals. But when but that's part of what makes him so great is that, like the part that you're not supposed to pay attention to, he's paying close attention to.
Giving it close attention, yeah.
Yeah, he's paying close attention to the part that nobody's going to notice. And, like, that's the thing about Eno, and that's the thing about, Talking Heads, is, like, every little sound on those records they're paying attention to it. And it's like every single little detail is like, that clave is okay, but what if we did this to it? Or what if we played it? What if we used a different one? Or what if we used a cowbell instead? Or, you know what I mean? Like all of that all of that nitpicky experimentation that used to happen in recording studios and used to happen in, that now is like, you go to a show and it's, two kids with laptops and it's like, okay, dude presses the space bar. You're pressing the space bar, man. That's what you're doing. Like, don't, you can put all the shit you want on the stage, but you're pressing the space bar, and that's what's happening here. And I like don't get me wrong, I love EDM, but I read a great Deadmau5 article, an essay that he wrote, and the name of the essay was "We All Press Play." And he was like, "Fuck you, people! All you DJs who are claiming this stuff." He's like, that's what's happening,
right?
Like, don't,
right.
And I'm like, yeah, good for you, buddy. Like, you're you're okay.
Yeah, you get it.
Right.
I got to look that up. That's awesome.
He had this great like I forget what they call it. I don't think it was almost like Twitch. But is Twitch the one where you watch people game?
Yes.
Is that Twitch?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So he had this like Twitch feed where he was in his studio, like working in his studio, and like there was a chat on the side. People would ask him questions, and he would stop and he would answer questions and shit. It was the coolest. I was watching it for hours, man. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. No, and I like people that are self-aware enough and objective to be able to examine what they do in their art form like that and be able to just call it like it is. Well, I mean, this has been great, just getting to literally just shoot the shit about music and what literally we would be doing, before intermission and after a gig and just talking about like
for the guy to come and knock on the door and 5 minutes.
I know.
Right? 5 minutes is Burgess.
Yeah. And so, man, this has just been great to, like you said earlier, hang out and talk with, real humans and, people and, talking and doing what we would normally be doing.
Yeah. Plus you guys, man, I mean, hanging with you guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say any time, man.
Good to see you, bro.
Yeah,
good to see you. Been a minute.
And unless Mr. Sipes has any final things he wishes to bring up or ask or anything of that nature, I think I'm good.
My heart is content, good sir.
Well, thanks you guys for letting me ramble. I just kind of like, took the ball and ran with it.
No, it's, sometimes these episodes, it's like I'll have a whole formulated thing of asking people questions and all of that. And other times it just goes off on a thing and it's like, hey, let's just talk music. So it's
well, it's a podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what it's about, man. So,
right.
Yeah, it's you're welcome to ramble here anytime you want, sir.
Dude.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Davey Sykes did not know you were such a big T-Heads fan, man. Good for you, buddy. Good for you.
Hey, man, shit. They're epic, man. There's just something about that feel. But yeah, likewise, man. Love that shit.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
We appreciate you.
I'm good, man. Thank you very much.
So, Mark Burgess, music, conversation.
Mark Burgess of New Jersey.
Yes. Yes, that is a great Jersey accent you're doing right there.
I faith in the good. In the dub. That's a funny thing, man. My mom's family's from Jersey, so like when I met Mark, I was just like, oh, this is like one of my people. He's like a good fellow, this guy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm so used to that cadence. I love it. Anyway,
for a while I was running into him a lot, and we were either playing together or I was at jam sessions where he was there, and we talked about that a little bit. But he was one of those people that was always around, and he's got, as you can tell, listener, he's got a very infectious way of talking and, his whole personality. And I discovered about myself that I'm a little bit of a sponge when I'm around people. And so I can naturally just pick up on certain things and characteristics and phrases that just become a part of my vocabulary. And it's not a contrived thing. I just start doing it particularly if I like something, I'll just start doing it. If you ever hear me say, yeah, 3 yeahs in a row on this podcast, that is picked up from Mr. Mark Burgess. And it's not an intentional thing. It's just something that I liked and that it stuck. And so now it's...
it's fair to say neither of you have Tourette's. That's just a thing that he did, and then you were like, I get that. And then you're like, yeah.
Yeah. And there are layers and there are intricacies to the yeah that I was unaware of until I really paid attention to how he used it. So, for example, you can go in agreement, yeah, like that. Or you can say it in sort of disapproval, like, yeah, like that. Or there's different tones to it. Or there's curious. Oh, yeah. And it's just, it's the words mixed with the tone of the voice. It's like a Smurf dilemma, It's like everything can kind of be yeah if you want it to be.
Is that where King Solomon was like, had the two women fighting over the baby Smurf, and he's like, I'm going to cut this blue motherfucker in half?
That is exactly it. You hit if there was a bullseye for that reference, you'd be dead center on that one.
I mean, not to brag, but I did teach catechism for a couple of years when I was a teenager. So
yeah, me
and that Bible.
Yeah, I mean,
I know all those parts.
Yeah. Hey, clearly you do. Yeah. So I love talking with Mark, and yeah, that was I didn't necessarily have a plan going into it, and some people listening might go, yeah, that was evident, after the podcast, but I really just wanted, it's like, what? No, it's like we were talking like 15, 20 minutes before we started, and we were already getting into the podcast with just talking music. And it's like, well, all right, this is what we do anyway. And I just wanted to get into it and just, tell me about like music you're listening to right now. Tell me about that weird, Talking Heads record that I haven't heard or whatever, just that's the Mark conversation.
No, there's like, as soon as you said he was coming on, it's like, there's just a certain approach that makes sense with somebody who's that garrulous and articulate. I'm like, my man can just talk. It's like, let him go. He's like, he knows where the interesting shit is. Again, it's like most of what we talk about, it comes to him while he's thinking about it. You could tell in the way that he's like, and that reminds me of another thing from another time. And that's the funny thing, though. It's like he's another thing that's really exciting about that is that you rarely hear like the same story the same way. And I rarely hear even the same story from Mark. It's like he usually just tells different stories with a whole lot of interesting detail. And that's what we got. That's what we were trying to give you, MoFlows.
Yeah. Well, and that's, with, again,
or
being...
so I thought.
Right. Well, again, with being... right. Again, with being repetitive a little bit, talking about capturing music talk and gig talk, we've had that conversation that we just had so many times on different gigs and talking about watching some video of Muddy Waters doing something on YouTube, watching, check out, this thing. And it's like, and I'll do that. And it's great. And he's turned me on to so much music just for all of those conversations. Or even thinking about, he'll talk about not just, oh yeah, this person played on this, like a factoid, but he talks about techniques in that, and he'll talk about the way somebody approaches something. And that to me is so invaluable to have a friend that you can talk about stuff like that with, because it just makes you think about your own perspective and approach differently, I think.
Absolutely. It's like that support, that reassurance. It's like it brings out the competitive edge in me because I'm like, homie's got so much more touch than me on the guitar. But it makes me think that, like, again, his sensibility has always reinforced for me the idea that it's less about being able to do exactly what he does as opposed to do what I do, and always make that stick in the moment because I have something to bring to it too. And it may be a function of more notes or less. You always know, though, when we play, just like when we play together or when we played with Mark, there's that sensibility that happens. Like the audience never gets to enjoy what we get to enjoy when we're up there cooking something like that.
Right.
And I think that's basically what we did in talk today instead of with instruments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's something to where you can hop along on that ride if you want to, and it's definitely there if you're, open to it. And not in an elitist way, but it's just if you're already into music conversation, and I'm just saying this right now, this is a music nerd episode, sometimes people are more into talking about the craft of creativity or how different approaches or techniques of things or maybe more of the technical stuff. But this is just pure music nerd and geekdom, as far as just talking about records and music and things like that. So if you're open to hearing that, then yeah, it's like, I don't see why there wouldn't be any reason to hop on that.
And if you're not with that, then we got beef in the streets and it's going 6 feet deep. So watch yourself.
Check yourself before you wreck. Oh, hey, mind meld, sir. All right. Well, this has been a fun episode. And
sure, fine, great, yeah.
No, I don't need to say that. I'm trying to get rid of the repetitiveness of my speaking. It was a blast. I had a great time.
You're a beautiful talker. You're one of my favorite talking persons.
Oh.
When I think of people who talk, the first thing that people are like, "What do you think about people who talk?" And I just say, "Jesse."
Well, you warm. And
people ask me that all the time.
Yeah, you warm the cockles of my heart, sir, when you compliment me as such. So I appreciate.
Well, if that's the case, can I hop on a soapbox real quick?
Please. This is your platform too.
2 things, motherfuckers, listen up. All right, if you're a meatbag, then put on your meatbag ears. It's Black History Month, so do yourself a favor, select from one of these fine people here, historical figures, whatever you want to call them, and read something. I recommend go to Maya Angelou. You can go to her website. It's on there. Read On the Pulse of Morning. It's a great poem. It will inspire you in a way that we need to be inspired right now after a year of being in fucking doors, licking the walls, touching ourselves, watching people do whatever.
Yep.
So that's the step one. The other step two is there's a lot of stuff going on that's not cool. Seems like apparently there's been a lot of stuff in the media, which unfortunately is being proven true with all the videos I watched about it today. A lot of hate crimes on the rise. Specifically, people are targeting Asian Americans. Somehow there's a correlation maybe to COVID or whatever it is. It's
yeah, I saw that.
Meatbags. We know where the meatbags are at. It's as much as we fuck around, we know where you guys stand. It's we don't tolerate that shit. So keep your eyes out. No. And if you see somebody step into somebody, it's always happening to people who are vulnerable. So it's happening to young people. It's happening to elderly people.
Yep.
That are being targeted by, and for whatever the reason is, we don't tolerate that. Not in our America. So just keep your eyes open. And step in if you can safely, and see if you can defuse the situation. That's how I'm living.
Be a good person is what he's saying there, and I agree with that very much. So
don't be afraid to pull the strap if they won't back down.
David,
I got 6 in the clip, 1 in the chamber.
Much like in Living Color, Davey don't play that. So
Davey don't. Oh, Davey don't F around.
No, Davey don't. Yeah. Thank you so much, citizens. We appreciate your support. If you like the podcast, please leave us a comment. Please send us a message. Please like and subscribe. I'm not one of those people that wants to beg for YouTube likes and subscriptions and that smash the like button thing, but I just genuinely want to hear from you. If you like the podcast, I want to have a dialogue. Let's talk. Let's share some ideas. If you want to have a certain artist on, or if you want to have a certain conversation, send in your questions. Do it. We want to hear from you, citizens. citizens. So
if you want to be on, hit us up. Tell us what you do.
Yeah.
Maybe we care.
Yeah. And, we're here for the weird, as you know. So, yeah, it's reach out to us. We're not afraid to get in cahoots with you. So. Yes. So thank you so much for your support, citizens, and we will see you next week.
Sonic City Council was created by Jesse Davidson and Davey Sipes and engineered by Max Taylor at Desert Sound Studio in Palmdale, California. Thank you to Disaster Cabinet for the outro music. Intro music written by Max Taylor. Sonic City Council is produced in association with Amps Music Academy and the Showcase Venue. For more information, visit theshowcasevenue.com.